Nations do not act randomly. They act on memory.
Every move Beijing makes today is a response to a disaster that happened 2 centuries ago.
The West sees a rising superpower. China sees a long overdue recovery. To understand where China is going, you have to understand the ghosts that are still in the room.
Power and Memory. Episode 1. The Century of Humiliation.
China didn't forget the 19th century. It redesigned its entire national strategy around it. And that decision still shapes every major confrontation with the West today. For most of the world, the 1800s are a chapter in a history book. For China, it is a living blueprint, a warning system, a psychological scar that never fully healed. So, what broke China's psyche during that century? And what did it learn that it will never ever forget? Let's set the scene. The year is 1800. The Qing dynasty rules one of the wealthiest, most sophisticated empires on Earth. Its population is vast. Its cultural influence stretches across Asia. In its own view, it isn't just a country. It's the Middle Kingdom, the center of civilization itself. This isn't arrogance. It's logic, built on millennia of stability. The system is built for harmony and order. The outside world is a source of tribute, not of threat. But there's a hidden vulnerability. The empire is designed for continuity, not for shock. Because while China looked inward, a revolution was building far away. In Europe, the Industrial Revolution was creating a new kind of power. Power driven by steam, steel, and a relentless hunger for global markets. 2 worldviews were on a collision course. One, introspective and ancient. The other, expansionist and commercial. China's mistake wasn't a lack of intelligence. It was a failure of imagination. It simply could not imagine that its ancient formulas for security were about to become obsolete. The fracture didn't start with a war. It started with a trade deficit. British merchants were buying huge amounts of Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. But they had little that China wanted to buy. Silver was draining from London to Beijing. The British solution was opium. When China's emperor moved to ban the drug, citing its devastation, the British response wasn't diplomatic. It was military. The First Opium War began in 1839. It was less a war between armies and more a demonstration of a new kind of warfare. British steamships, ignoring wind and current, moved up Chinese rivers. Their modern artillery shelled coastal forts from distances Qing cannons couldn't reach. The result was inevitable, crushing defeat. The Treaty of Nanjing in 1842 sealed it. The terms weren't just punitive. They were humiliating. China was forced to cede Hong Kong. It had to open 5 ports to foreign trade and residents. It granted extraterritoriality, meaning British subjects in China would be tried under British law, not Chinese law. For the first time, the emperor's sovereignty within his own borders was legally divided. This wasn't the end. It was the template. The Second Opium War followed. The magnificent Summer Palace, a complex of gardens and palaces filled with centuries of art, was looted. And then it was burned to the ground by British and French troops. More treaties followed. Each one extracted more. More open ports, more legal privileges for foreigners, huge cash indemnities, and the legalization of the opium trade itself. France, America, Russia, Germany, Japan all secured their own unequal treaties. The psychological consequence was profound. This wasn't a lost battle. It was the systematic unraveling of a 2,000-year-old concept of order. The Middle Kingdom wasn't defeated by a civilization it could respect. It was dismantled by what it saw as barbarians, using tools it didn't understand, over a commodity it had banned. The lesson was seared into the national mind. Technological backwardness leads to national dismemberment. Sovereignty isn't an idea. It's a concrete thing that can be taken piece by superior force. And the world order isn't based on ethics. It's based on raw power. In most countries, history is studied. In China, history is applied. This period isn't called the 19th century in Chinese schools. It's called the century of humiliation. That's a deliberate choice. It's not just a description of the past. It's a diagnosis of a national disease. This memory is built into the foundation. School textbooks emphasize the trauma. Museums display the unequal treaties as evidence of a broken world. The ruins of the old summer palace are preserved not just as a park, but as a patriotic lesson, a permanent monument to the cost of weakness. The lesson is repeated like a mantra. Backwardness leads to beating. Therefore, the single most important national task is to reverse that backwardness. At all costs, develop economic power, technological power, military power, so that no foreign power can ever again dictate terms from a gunboat. History here stops being a series of events. It becomes an instruction manual. Every chapter of the 19th century is a lesson in what to avoid. Every loss of territory is a ghost that must be laid to rest. The never again mindset wasn't born in a political meeting. It was forged in the fires of the summer palace and signed into law in the fine print of those unequal treaties. It is the foundational software of modern China. See modern Chinese policy through this lens, and things start to make sense. Actions that seem excessive to outsiders often look like essential precautions from inside. Take sovereignty. In the West, sovereignty is often seen as flexible, a principle that can be balanced against others. For China, sovereignty is absolute, the first and final line of defense. Foreign criticism of its internal affairs isn't just disagreed with, it's rejected as the first step toward interference. A direct echo of the treaty ports. Look at the obsession with technological independence. The huge push into semiconductors, AI, and aerospace isn't just an economic plan. It's a strategic imperative, born from watching British steamships on the Yangtze. Dependence on foreign tech is seen as a fatal vulnerability. Or territory. The intense focus on Taiwan, the South China Sea, Tibet, it's not just about resources. It's about the irreversible consolidation of sovereignty. Every piece of land lost during the century of humiliation represents a failure that must be corrected. Even China's economic deals follow the logic. Projects like the Belt and Road Initiative build ties that create interdependence, but on China's terms. It's a long-term project to reshape the board, to ensure no coalition can ever again strangle its economy. The pattern is clear. Eliminate every form of vulnerability that was exploited in the 19th century. What looks like ambition today is, in Beijing's view, the bare minimum required for security tomorrow. This creates a deep gap in understanding. Western strategy often works in short-term, transactional logic. Election cycles, quarterly reports, crises are managed as they come. Chinese strategy works on century-long logic. Its planning cycles span decades. Its benchmarks are historical. A policy isn't judged by next year's headlines, but by whether it prevents a recurrence of 1842. When the West sees China as unexpectedly harsh, China sees itself as consistently prudent. When the West offers a deal, China looks for clauses that might become a new form of dependency. When the West speaks of a rules-based order, China remembers an order whose rules were written to its profound disadvantage. It's not that one side is right and the other is wrong. They are operating from different historical calendars. One is counting years, the other is counting lessons. This story isn't about the past. It's about a persistent present. China's behavior isn't a mystery. It's a lesson being applied. Every decision in Beijing is filtered through one question. Does this move us further from the 19th century, or does it risk pulling us back? The century of humiliation ended over 100 years ago. But for the Chinese state, it never really ended. It just became a permanent advisor in the room, a whisper of caution, a blueprint for survival. This memory explains the urgency. It explains the intolerance for weakness. It explains the long, patient focus on overtaking every form of foreign advantage. China does not fear the future. It fears repeating the past. And that fear built the superpower you see today.